welcome to my kitchen and to baking month here at Food and Gladness. Today I am going to be showing you how to make a lemon ricotta loaf cake. It's a really easy recipe, and I wanted to take a little bit of extra time today, since we are focusing on baking, to go into more than just the recipe itself, but different methods, really, not so much techniques, but methods of how to bake, and basically just the whole process. So let's go ahead and get started with turning on our oven. So we are going to turn our oven to preheat to a 350 degrees. Usually when you start baking, that is going to be the first thing that you do. It's usually the first thing that is noted in the recipe for a reason. You want to get that oven to the correct temperature. If you are not sure if your oven cooks at the temperature that you're setting it to, you can buy an oven thermometer and keep that in the oven, or put that in the oven, and essentially it is oven safe, and it will give you a reading on what the temperature of your oven is. Some ovens have hot and cold spots, where one spot will get hotter than the others, or one spot will remain cooler. That's something that you can take some time with an oven thermometer and kind of look into, so that you know where the best place to position your baked goods in your oven is. So to get into actually getting our ingredients together, the first thing that we're going to measure off is our flour, and that is back here. Pardon me. We're going to be doing 1.5 cups of flour. Now, this is one thing where you want to take note of this. In baking, usually the most exact way to know that you are going to get a consistent result with your recipe is to actually measure by weight. So that would be getting a scale and measuring out the actual weight of the flour, the sugar, the eggs, even all of that, and that would get you a consistent baked good. I'm a home cook. I have a kitchen scale. I could do that if I wanted to, but I don't have a bakery that I have to consistently have the same results, so I don't do that. But there is something that you can do with your flour to get it about to that correct amount. I feel like this is one of the areas where a lot of people kind of potentially I can't think of a better term than like shoot yourself in the foot with this as far as your baked goods and getting inconsistent results, because I think a lot of us grew up measuring flour this way. You scoop your measure into the flour, and then you take the back of a knife and scoop the top off. That is actually the incorrect way to measure flour, guys. So that is going to give you a heavier scoop of flour than if you do a spoon and level technique. So that means you're just taking a spoon. It really doesn't matter what size spoon, at least not that I've found. And you're putting in still more than what looks to be the correct size, but you're putting it in loosely, so it's not packing in there. This isn't brown sugar. And then you do the technique where you take the back of the knife and scrape it off like that, and that's your cup of flour. Now we need 1.5 cups today, so I'm going to repeat that process with my 1/2 cup measure. So anytime you see in a recipe where they are specifically saying that you want to spoon and level your flour, this is what you're doing. And really, anytime you're making a cake, cookies as well, but I would say specifically for a cake, you want to make sure you're doing this because you don't want it to be heavy. Now the next thing that we need, which is going to be our next dry ingredient, is baking powder. We're doing 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder. Now I don't really do that technique with my baking powder. I just put it in there lightly so that I'm not packing it. Trying to get my 1/2 teaspoon measure here. And if you wanted to add salt to this recipe, this would be where you would add it in. So I've got all my dry ingredients in one bowl here. And then we're gonna start in on our next ingredients. I am gonna take a quick second here to mix these dry ingredients though. And the reason that you would do that is because you want to make sure that any dry ingredients you're putting together are evenly distributed throughout your flour, so that you don't have, if you mix it improperly, you don't have one patch that has all the baking powder and all the salt, and then, you know, everything else really doesn't have that. So that's why you take that second to mix that. We need 1.5 sticks of butter, which would be 12 tablespoons. Room temperature, of course. And what we're gonna do with these is just unwrap them and put them into our mixing bowl straight away. We will come back over here in a second to actually mix them, but the first thing we're gonna do is just get them in the bowl. We'll come back to that soon. The next thing that we're going to measure off is going to be our ricotta. So this is what makes this a little bit of a different kind of loaf cake than you maybe have had before. I am using whole milk ricotta because since it's a baked good, I want it to have all that fat and goodness. I don't know how they are doing this. There's no pull tab. So I guess we're just gonna cut it. All right. So 1.5 cups of ricotta cheese. Now it doesn't, actually I'm sorry, I'm gonna wait on this because I only grabbed out 1.5 cup measures and I'm gonna need those in a second here. I'm gonna measure out my sugar as well. So 1.5 cups of sugar. You'll hear me say 1.5 quite a few times today. This is organic sugar. Technically I should be smudging down these lumps, but I'm pretty confident it's gonna get mixed in fairly well, and I don't normally take extra attention with that, even though I probably should. So I'm measuring the ricotta in the same dry measures as I measured my other ingredients, because I just feel like it's a little bit easier. You can do a wet measure if you wanted to, but you can see how this is kind of like sort of gelatinous, I guess is what you'd call it. And I kind of build this up a little bit. I don't really mind if there's a little bit more in there. Nathan keeps calling this cheesecake because it's cake made with ricotta cheese. It doesn't taste like cheesecake.
Looks like yogurt.
It doesn't taste like cheese. It's very light and just nice. And if you do not like the lemon flavor, it's actually very easy to leave that out. So that is good. And one more thing that I need a little bowl for. Now, this obviously, you don't have a cooking show, you don't have to put everything in nice, neat little bowls, but I do find that it's super helpful if you do this ahead, because then you have everything already ready. When it's time to incorporate it, you have it already cracked, and it just kind of saves some stress. So I would recommend doing this at least a little bit, just to kind of give yourself a leg up. We're going to be using 3 large eggs, and this especially, even if you don't want to pre-portion your other ingredients, I definitely recommend doing it with the eggs, because, you know, we've all cracked eggs before and sometimes shells get in them. So you don't want to just crack this straight into the bowl of your stand mixer, because you could end up with a crunchy bit of egg in there. Nobody wants that.
No.
Nobody wants that. And then we're gonna add in our vanilla, which I like to use 2 teaspoons for this recipe. I'm just gonna clean out my teaspoon measure here. And this is pretty much always added in with the eggs when you're mixing, so I just put them in the same bowl. I'm gonna do 2.5 teaspoons today, because I kind of feel like you can't have too much vanilla personally. Now, because this is a lemon cake, if you wanted to, you could also add lemon extract. I don't particularly prefer to use citrus extracts because I feel like you can just use the fruit and it's better to me. But you definitely could add a teaspoon or a teaspoon and a half of lemon extract. I have my lemon here, the nicest one that I had with the nicest skin, because this is where we're going to be getting the lemon flavor from, washed and dried. And normally what I'll do is I get my zester, or you could have a microplane, whatever kind of small grating tool that you have, and just, it's got this little, mine at least has this little rubber tip on the end, so it's easy to kind of prop it up like this. And I just get a small plate, because if I get a small bowl, it kind of goes all over the counter. So, and I'm just going to zest this entire lemon. You see there where it's a lighter yellow underneath the zest, but not quite to the white. That's what you want, because if you go too far into the white, to the pith part of the lemon, it gets bitter, and that doesn't taste very good. It does take me a minute to zest this lemon. Now, I don't put the lemon juice into this, just because the recipe itself doesn't call for any additional liquid really, but if it did, I would put the zest in. And if I felt like the mix needed a little bit of extra liquid, I would just put the juice from this lemon in here. I'm not gonna waste the juice from the lemon. Probably what I'm gonna do with it actually is I am going to be making a berry topping to go on top of this, because it's my favorite way to serve this cake, which I have done a video on that berry topping before. I will link that in the description for you so you can see that if you want to serve the cake the same way. But since I will be making that with some fresh strawberries and blueberries today, I'll just squeeze the lemon juice over top of that and give it a little bit extra flavor that way. All right, so all of our ingredients are now ready. What are we gonna do with this additional little piece of butter here? So, maybe not. So I have my loaf pan here, and we are going to grease and flour this. Now, throughout the whole realm of baking, there's different methods used to make sure that your cake comes out. You can use parchment paper if you want, and really no extra greasing. You can also get, they have almost like the cooking sprays, the quick release cooking sprays, but they have ones that include flour in them and are specifically marketed for baking. I don't like those, and I don't really like using just the parchment. Now granted, this is just because this is the way I grew up doing it, but in other times of trying those other methods, I feel like this is the one that gives it really the best release, first of all, which is my first concern, and the best flavor, because I really don't like the flavor that you get from some of those baking sprays, and I feel like they make the outside of your cake darker than this method does. You'll still get some golden brown on the outside of this, but I don't know. This is just the way that I do it, the way that I prefer to do it. So this is always the way that I would recommend for you to do it as well. But if you have a different method you prefer, you are absolutely able to do that. Now, what we're looking for here, you see that I put my little glove on, and you might be able to see if Nathan can catch it. There is a section there that does not have butter on it on the very bottom. And that's what you're looking for, because I want to go back in and make sure that that's buttered. You're always going to have some streaking and things like that, but you just want to try to make sure that for the most part everything has been buttered. So what I'll do is I'll like hold it up to the light and like try to see different angles of it just to make sure it's completely buttered all the way around. That was probably about a tablespoon of butter. And then we use a little bit of flour. About 2 tablespoons worth of flour. And the flour, you're just gonna beat this pan up. So if you had a bad day, you know, you can do this.
Die pan.
And this is just my method to get it on the sides without, and then like, this isn't pretty, but just kind of spank the pan. And that gets the excess flour out. So this is really just all that's needed to make sure that it releases cleanly. So this is what it should look like at the end. And you will be able to see if there were any spots that you missed with the butter, because the flour won't stick to it because it doesn't have the butter. All right, my friends, let's get started on creaming butter. If you have never creamed butter before, what it is the process of bringing butter and sugar to almost a frosting-like consistency. So you need absolutely room temperature butter. And I'm actually going to start by just breaking up my butter first, and then we will add the sugar in. A lot of times you can just do both of them in the same step, but I'm just gonna break up the butter a little bit first. Okay, we are not creamed, but that's my first step here. And scrape down the sides and the bottom. Then we're gonna add our sugar in here.
Sugar.
Now this is gonna take us a couple minutes to get to the right consistency. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this started. I will have you guys come back when it is to the right consistency so you can see it, and then we'll start adding in our other ingredients. Hey guys, welcome back. All right, so we are now at about the right consistency for our creamed butter. You can see how much lighter and fluffier it is compared to the lump of butter and sugar that we had in there before. I did stop and scrape down the bowl once, and then, and you can do that more than once if you want to, and just keep whipping it until it's to the correct, excuse you, the correct consistency. Also, what this is doing is it's whipping air into it, and we want this to be a light cake. It's a loaf cake, so it's a little bit like a pound cake, but it's lighter than that, so we want it to maintain that lightness. So that's really what we're going for here. Now at this point, this is where I like to add the lemon zest. You can add it later, really at whatever point. I just feel like it gets mixed in a little bit better if I add it right now. And then we're also going to add in the ricotta. So we're just gonna plop that in there, which was really unattractive. And then we're gonna mix this together again until everything's all nice and combined. You can already smell the lemon coming up. Can you smell that, honey?
Yes.
That's a good sign. All right. With everything incorporated, we'll scrape down the bowl again. Scraping down the bowl is something that you will hear quite a lot in baking recipes that you may find, and the reason is that if you don't, there will be parts that are not incorporated properly. So I always find that my problem spot is the bottom. So like for me, scraping the bottom is really important, but you also want to scrape the sides because as it rotates, as the blade rotates, well, not blade, but you know, the paddle rotates, it pushes things up on the sides. So if you don't scrape that back down into where the paddle is going to be able to get at it again, then it's not going to be mixed in the way it should. All right, we are now going to begin adding our eggs. Another thing that you don't want to do is just plop all of your eggs in there. We want to continue the process of getting air into the cake, and eggs, specifically egg whites, are a great ability to basically aerate a cake because the egg whites really like to whip up, just like with a meringue or even a whipped cream. I mean, you're not using eggs and whipped cream, but that same kind of consistency. So we want to give each one of these eggs a chance to get fully combined in there and get more air whipped into it. So when you're reading a recipe and it says add egg one at a time, think about that you're adding aeration in there. It's not just a matter of getting the egg mix into the batter, you're adding more air. So we're gonna just pour until a yolk pops out and add more air.
And the air helps to do what?
Make it a lighter, fluffier cake. You know, you don't want a cake that's dense and heavy. You don't want a cake that feels like bread. You want it to be light and fluffy. And the reason that you're doing this before adding the flour, the reason we do all of the wet ingredients before adding the flour, right now it's whipping air into it. If we had the flour in there right now, what it would be doing is adding gluten strands, developing the gluten that's already in our flour into gluten strands that would make it more bready and heavy. And so we don't want to do that. All our aeration we want to do before we're adding flour in. And this is nicely mixed now. Again, we are going to scrape the sides. It's really good to have a good, do not put your hand on there. There's raw egg in this, sir. All right, one more egg. And as I mentioned, this does have the vanilla in it as well, so the vanilla is incorporating too. In general, I like to whip it on about a medium speed. I will start it a little bit slower so that my ingredients don't all slosh out or spray out, but then I'll bring it up to about a medium. And one more time around the block here. All right, we're gonna add our final egg. Let this get incorporated nicely. I know a lot of folks wipe down the beaters too, but I feel like the beater's getting plenty of action as it is. So I usually don't spend much time wiping down the beater at this stage. give it a little bit extra time this time around just to get a little bit more air in there before we put our flour and baking powder in there. Flour and baking powder is the last thing that we're gonna add in. We wanna make sure that we don't over mix that.
It's pretty cool to think that was just a stick of butter and some sugar and eggs.
Yep.
It looks really nice.
Yeah, baking is really fun. It's amazing the things that you can make and amazing the different things that you can make out of basically the same ingredients, just in different proportions. All right, now at this point, you can choose what you want to do with your flour. If you really want to keep this light and fluffy, you can take this off the mixer now and fold in your flour, which would be essentially doing this outside motion, bringing it up like this so that it's maintaining the fluffiness you've already whipped into it. I honestly don't feel like this cake needs to be that light and fluffy since it is a loaf cake. So I just go ahead and do a quick mix in the stand mixer. Again, start slow so that your flour doesn't fly everywhere, and then speed it up a bit. Okay, now that was just a real quick mix. I'm gonna give it a couple more turns with my spatula just to make sure that all of the flour is well incorporated. We don't have pockets of flour because you don't want a pocket full of flour in any sense of the word. And this would be the time that you scrape down your beater. You can also hang it on the sides to get a little bit more off. If you're a cake batter eater, this is what you give to your helper. I'm not technically recommending that because, you know, problems, but I'm not going to say that I have not done that a time or two. And this is a good time too, after you've taken it off of the mixer, to just make sure that all of your sides are well scraped down. You've got all the flour off of there. Check the bottom, make sure you don't have any unmixed ingredients there. All right, we are ready to put this in our loaf pan now. So that is back over here where we left it. And sorry, I'm trying to do this so I can get you a good angle and not drop the bowl at the same time. Usually one of these recipes is just about right for my loaf pan. It is gonna come up a little bit in the oven, so it is gonna rise up. So just like with a cupcake, you really don't want to go any more than 3/4 of your tin full.
The lemon isn't too strong.
Right. Since we didn't add any more than one, and we just added, since we didn't add the juice, we just added the zest. It's just this light lemon. I really like it for springtime and like Mother's Day. It's just a light, bright cake, especially with that fresh berry topping. Now, as far as topping, you could, if you wanted to, sprinkle some sugar over the top here just to give it a nice little crust on the topping. This is going to go into our preheated oven, and we will bring you back when we are taking this out of the oven so you can see how nice it comes out of the pan and what it looks like. Hi guys, welcome back. So we are ready to pull this cake out of the oven. Let me turn it off here. Or thought I did. Alright, so the first thing we're looking for normally with a loaf cake, you will see that crack down the middle. The first thing we're looking for is kind of a jiggle test, because when it's not quite done, you will see a considerable amount of jiggle. Then I've got a toothpick here. Now there is some crumb there. A lot of time you will see a disclaimer, kind of a note that you should take it out when a toothpick inserted in it comes out clean. I don't necessarily believe that. So I find the best success with cakes when I do have a couple of crumbs. You can tell the difference. So if you put it in and it comes out and it's all batter, you know the cake is not ready yet. But if you do have a couple of crumbs like we had, there's still heat in here, which is what we're trying to get to escape at this point. So it's still gonna cook a little bit. So I like to pull it a little bit on the early side so that it's not overdone. Now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna put this over here. I have, you don't have to put a baking sheet under it, but I just have a little grid cooling rack. We're gonna cool it in the pan for 5 to 10 minutes and then put it out on this and just let it come to room temperature and cool down completely. And that's our cake. It's that easy. It's gonna be delicious with the berry topping. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Have a great day. Alright guys, Nathan's gonna do a first bite test for us here and see what he thinks about the cake.
Got to get a little. It's very spongy and, like my wife says, light, and there's just a slight taste of lemon. But it's nice because it's not overly sweet like some stuff. Like you go to the store and you buy a cake from the store, you eat it and you're like, whoa, this is way too sweet. But this is perfect. Nice and calm. The berries add a good fruity flavor. So I recommend it.
All right, guys, we're gonna go eat this. One thing I did forget to tell you, it was in the oven for about 35 minutes. So that's kind of your estimated time frame.
What about the strawberries?
We're linking to the strawberry topping video. Yep. All right, guys, enjoy.